I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my downtown apartment, the city stretching below me in a glittering sea of lights. My heels clicked softly on the polished oak floor as I reached for my phone, its screen buzzing insistently. A notification. Another comment on social media. Samantha Blake? Still wearing those shoes. My stomach tightened, and for a moment, I remembered those snickers, those whispers behind my back in high school hallways. I smoothed the silk blouse over my shoulders, feeling the delicate weight of it, soft ivory against my skin, paired with trousers that had cost more than my first paycheck. A smirk touched my lips. They mocked me then. They wouldn't dare now. The call came next, an unexpected number flashing across the screen. I hesitated, then swiped to answer. The voice on the other end was dripping with false familiarity. "Hey, Sam. I saw your post. I had no idea you actually made it big." I pressed the phone to my ear, letting the words settle in before I spoke. Inside, I felt that familiar mix of pride, hurt, and a quiet, simmering satisfaction. I remembered all the times I had been overlooked, underestimated, laughed at for my thrifted shoes or hand-me-down bag. Now I had a choice. I could remind them of the girl they dismissed, or simply let the results speak for themselves. I can still feel the sting of those early days. High school corridors were a minefield of judgment, each glance a subtle reminder that I didn't belong. My name is Samantha Blake, but back then, it felt like the universe was reminding me how invisible I was. My shoes, scuffed, cheap, the kind I had carefully chosen from clearance racks, were a target. "Where did you get those?" they'd sneer. "From a garage sale?" The laughter that followed wasn't cruel out loud, but it sank into my chest like tiny needles. I remember one day, clutching my worn sneakers under the cafeteria table, my hands shaking so badly, I almost dropped my tray. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the walls, to be anywhere but there. But it wasn't just classmates. Even family had a way of reminding me I was behind or different. My grandmother, who had always been my quiet refuge, noticed the way I flinched at those comments. She pressed a small, worn notebook into my hands one evening, her eyes soft but determined. "Sam," she said, "this is where you'll put your ideas, your sketches, your dreams. They may laugh, but your heart knows what it wants. Don't let them steal your joy." I spent nights scribbling designs, sketching shoes I couldn't afford, imagining the textures and colors in vivid detail. Every humiliation fueled me. Every whispered insult became a quiet promise to myself. One afternoon, I found a flyer for a local fashion workshop. My parents scoffed. "That's a waste of time," they said. My best friend hesitated, worried about my chances. But I didn't care. That night, under the dim light of my bedroom, I made a decision. I would stop letting other people define me. I would create my own path, no matter how long or uncertain the journey. The notebook in my hands felt heavier now, not with paper, but with possibility. That little book became my talisman, my proof that I could hold my dreams close even when no one else did. Every insult, every mocking glance, every whispered comment about my shoes was now a spark, not a chain. I didn't yet know how far I would go, or that one day those very shoes I dreamed of designing would make the world pay attention. But I knew one thing: I would never let them see me broken again. After high school, I packed a small suitcase, my worn notebook clutched tightly in one hand, and boarded a bus to New York City. The city was overwhelming, noisy, crowded, buzzing with people who seemed to know exactly where they were going. I didn't. But I had my designs, my sketches, and a stubborn determination that refused to let me fail. I found a small studio apartment in Brooklyn, with a view of fire escapes and brick walls, far from luxury, but perfect for imagining what could be. Nights blurred into mornings as I sketched tirelessly. I cut leather scraps with trembling fingers, stitched seams imperfectly, but each shoe was a promise, a step toward proving my worth. That's when I met Rachel Whitman, a seasoned designer who saw my first rough prototypes. She was sharp, intimidating, but she believed in me. "You have an eye, Samantha," she said, examining a sketch with her brow furrowed. "Talent isn't enough. You need grit, strategy, and patience. But I think you have all three. Under her mentorship, I learned everything: sourcing materials, pitching to buyers, photographing my shoes for catalogs. I faced rejection after rejection. Stores said my designs were too bold. Magazines dismissed me as unproven. Some days, I cried on the floor of my studio, my hands raw, my confidence in tatters. But I kept going. Every small victory, my first sale to a boutique in Soho, a feature in an indie fashion blog, a commission from a local influencer, was a secret joy. I didn't post about it online. My family had no idea. My high school peers would have scoffed if they knew. I was building my empire quietly, letting the work speak louder than the whispers of my past. I experimented with textures, bold colors, and unconventional materials. My shoes weren't just footwear, they were statements. And slowly, I began to see my vision take shape. Orders doubled, then tripled, and my little studio became a hive of activity. I hired a few assistants, all passionate, all believing in the magic of creation. Through it all, the notebook my grandmother had given me sat in the corner of my desk, pages worn, margins scribbled with ideas. Every design, every pattern, every carefully stitched seam was a tribute to the girl who had been mocked for her shoes, to the woman who refused to be invisible. And then came the day when I realized something incredible. I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. I had created a brand that could rival some of the names I had once envied from glossy magazines. The girl who had been laughed at for her thrifted sneakers was now on the verge of owning a designer label that people would queue for, a name that would command attention, respect, and admiration. The invitation was casual, almost innocent, a reunion of my old high school friends, some classmates who had once mocked my shoes, some faces I hadn't seen in years. I could have ignored it, avoided the discomfort of revisiting old wounds, but instead, I decided to attend on my terms. I arrived at the rooftop event space, the city skyline glowing behind me, my heels clicking confidently on the marble floor. My designer shoes, the first pair of the collection I had secretly launched under my brand, glimmered under the soft lights. People turned, heads swiveling as whispers filled the room. I felt a rush of satisfaction. This was my moment, and they didn't yet know it. Faces I had once avoided made their way toward me. Jennifer, who had laughed at my thrifted sneakers during senior year, stopped mid-step, her smile faltering. Mark, who had mocked every outfit I wore, barely recognized me. They expected the girl they once ridiculed, the one who had never quite fit in. Instead, they found Samantha Blake, the woman who had built an empire in silence. I let them take in my surroundings before speaking. The space around me spoke louder than words. Walls adorned with photographs of my collections, sleek displays showcasing shoes that people would pay thousands to wear, awards and magazine features neatly framed. The air smelled faintly of leather and jasmine, an unexpected but deliberate touch. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm but firm, carrying the authority I had earned. "You all remember me," I began, "the girl you laughed at for her shoes." A few heads nodded, faces sheepish, eyes wide. "Those shoes," I continued, lifting one of my designer heels, were the first step in creating something bigger. Something you never expected. Gasps spread through the group. Mark's jaw tightened. Jennifer's eyes widened, a flush of shame coloring her cheeks. "Samantha," someone murmured, almost afraid to say the words. "Yes," I said, letting a small smile curl on my lips. "I own the brand you've seen in magazines and stores. Those same shoes you mocked now carry my name, and my work is respected, collected, and desired around the world." Silence settled for a heartbeat. Then disbelief rippled through the room, quickly turning into awe. They looked at me with a mix of astonishment, guilt, and admiration, an emotion they had never dared to show back in high school. I let the moment linger. They had expected humility, perhaps awkwardness. Instead, they found confidence, elegance, and undeniable power. I was the culmination of every effort, every sleepless night, every mocked moment transformed into determination. And in that instant, I realized that the satisfaction wasn't just in showing them success. It was in knowing I had built it entirely on my terms, quietly, persistently, without compromise. The girl they had underestimated had become the woman they couldn't ignore. The room was quiet, the hum of the city outside barely audible over the tension I had carefully cultivated. I could see it in their eyes. The realization that the girl they had mocked for her shoes was no longer the one they could control, belittle, or dismiss. I took a slow breath and let it out deliberately. "I'm willing to help," I said, my tone even, but carrying authority. "But things have changed. If you want to be part of my world, you'll need to change too." Jennifer shifted uncomfortably. "Changed how?" she asked. "Respect," I replied. "Respect for my work, for the craft, and for yourself. No more judgments, no more assumptions. You've seen the result of mocking someone. Now it's time to reflect on how you approach people and opportunities." Mark, who had once sneered at my shoes, cleared his throat. "So, you're saying there's a way back?" "Yes," I said, letting a small smile soften my firmness. "But on my terms. Everyone here has to take ownership of their actions. No excuses, no laziness. If you want to be involved, whether it's learning, collaborating, or supporting, you have to commit. You must pursue growth, drop toxic patterns, and genuinely try to be better versions of yourselves." I could see the weight of my words sink in. Some flinched, some nodded, some looked skeptical, but I didn't waver. Compassion didn't mean weakness. I had given them the chance to reflect, to evolve. The power had shifted, and it was mine to wield wisely. Then I pulled out my grandmother's worn notebook, the same one that had started my journey years ago. "This is where it all began," I said, holding it up. "Remember, every insult, every doubter, every mocking glance, it doesn't define you. What defines you is what you build, the effort you put in, and the respect you carry. I built a brand from nothing, and you have the chance to build something meaningful too, if you choose to rise above your old ways." Some looked at me with tentative admiration, others with shame or guilt. I let them sit with it. I didn't need their immediate approval. I needed their commitment to change, and if they weren't ready, that was their choice. For the first time in years, I felt fully untethered from the past. I wasn't just the girl they had laughed at. I was the woman who had transformed every mockery into fuel for success. And now, I had the authority to shape not just my future, but how those around me approached theirs. This was no longer just about shoes. This was about respect, power, and growth. And I intended to make sure everyone understood that, in my world, only integrity and effort could walk alongside me. Weeks later, I walked through the flagship store of my brand, Samantha Blake Designs, the familiar scent of polished leather and faint jasmine filling the air. My team bustled around me, arranging displays, photographing new designs, and chatting excitedly about upcoming launches. For a moment, I paused and let the sight sink in. This was everything I had worked for, the culmination of years of effort, tears, and determination. Some of the people who had once mocked me had reached out, cautiously, tentatively, seeking guidance or even just acknowledgement. I had watched them take the first steps toward change, pursuing their passions, learning humility, shedding old toxic habits. And it felt right. Not revenge, not vindication, but fulfillment. I ran my fingers over the worn cover of the notebook my grandmother had given me. The pages, smudged with pencil and ink, still held the earliest sketches of shoes I had dreamed of creating. That little book had been my secret mentor, my silent cheerleader, my reminder that I could rise above ridicule. I smiled, feeling the warmth of those early lessons, the pride of the journey, and the strength of the woman I had become. Looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows of the store, I saw the bustling city below. People were moving, dreaming, striving, and I realized how far I had come. I had turned mockery into motivation, ridicule into determination. Every laugh that had stung, every whispered insult, had been a stepping stone to this moment of quiet triumph. I breathed in deeply, feeling the leather of my own latest creation under my fingertips, the sleek elegance of the store around me. the loyalty of my team, and the respect of those who had once doubted me. This was proof that resilience and perseverance could transform pain into power, dreams into reality. And in that serene, radiant moment, I whispered to myself, half a vow, half a celebration. They mocked my shoes, now I own the designer brand. And I'll never let anyone dim the shine of my journey again.